We are a peaceful people. Struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble. Just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one karage, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here, and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere. Big mistake, 'cause we ain't giving up no mountain. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Budget in Focus. We're discussing Budget 2025, the PPP's farewell budget. I'm joined by Coretta McDonald, Member of Parliament and Shadow Minister of Education. Coretta, welcome to Budget in Focus. We are going to be exploring your presentation just a little bit deeper than the time in the National Assembly allowed you. Welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me, and I hope that I'll be able to do justice, and I'll be able to be a little more passionate when I speak with you.
Well, the environment is different, and there are no constraints here except basic decorum. So we have seen in the budget debate the People's Progressive Party preference for speaking about everything else under the sun except the budget. They have, studiously avoided the budget. They have resorted to abuse, and they have failed to represent the numbers in their respective sectors. In the case of the education department, or the education sector, I beg your pardon, you're on record questioning the delivery of education against the numbers, the dollars voted. Help us to understand whether or not the investments in education or in the education sector yielded the kind of results that you anticipated it ought to have yielded.
Well, like everything else, the PPP, they're only interested in dollars. They're interested in dollars, and they're interested in putting up huge buildings for you to see. But if one were to inspect what happens there in those buildings, then we would recognize that many of them would have to be condemned. Having said that, let me say to you, education is in shambles. When the coalition took government in 2015, we met an education sector that was here, there, and everywhere. The coalition government with President David Granger then brought semblance to the education sector. And you would recognize that our children, there was a huge dropout rate with our children. We had children not being able to, and even those who were at school, many of them couldn't pass examinations. Math was at its lowest. English was at its lowest. And there were strategic systems that were put in place by the coalition government then. And we saw the results of it. So it was not only about dollars, but you were seeing value for money. Let me say to you, when the coalition took over government again in 2015, Priya Manik Chand sat there as the education minister before May 11th, 2015. We saw children matriculation rate in our learners at grade 6 level. Again, I want to repeat and I want to emphasize this, at its lowest. We saw the grades at CXC, again at its lowest. But here, Priya Manik Chand is here today telling this nation about how many schools they have built and how many teachers they have trained. What she is failing to tell us is, with all the schools that you're constructing, how many learners are in those schools? And do you have teachers to occupy those buildings that you're building? And that's why I said in my budget presentation that it's good to talk about all the schools that you've constructed, but what happens after the cutting of the ribbons and the cameras, what happens when they are gone? Absolutely nothing. And so this is what the PPP are good at: the big gloat and glamour and nothing behind it. We saw the rate at CXC going way up under the coalition government. And that's after we took over in 2015. Just after the coalition left office, we are seeing the results again of poor performances at all the levels: grade 6, CXC, and the Cape. And this here is a reflection of what happens in the sector. If we have persons within the sector who don't understand how the sector ought to operate, then you know exactly what we are going to find happening in the sector. But it's good to talk about, we constructed school here, we constructed school there, and we constructed school there. While you're talking about that, and mind you, we are not against construction of schools all across this country, new schools. We are also not against the rehabilitation of schools, which we've not seen happening on a large scale in this country. And why you're not seeing that? It is simple, because if you construct a new school, then the returns, the kickbacks, it's much more than if you were to renovate a school. And so we have many, many schools across this country that is in dire need of repairs. But we're not seeing the focus there. What we see the focus on is the Queen's College and the bishops. But when you talk about the Bushlot Secondary, there's no interest there. When you talk about Watuka Day Primary, there's no interest there. When you talk about schools in Mukka and schools in South Georgetown, there is no rush there, because in those schools are the children of the ordinary Guyanese who are not part and parcel of the elite of the PPP.
It is interesting that for the People's Progressive Party, life in Guyana started in 1992. However, when it comes to education, you never hear the PPP talking about the number of schools they inherited in 1992. All of those schools were constructed, the majority of those schools were constructed by the People's National Congress in government. Mm-hmm. And a number of them were inherited from the church school system, which were taken under the management of the Ministry of Education following independence. In 10 years, the number of schools constructed by the PNC without oil is remarkable. Mm-hmm. I have the number. I wouldn't cite a number now because it doesn't come to recollection immediately, and I don't want to provide information that's not accurate. Now, you talked about building things that you can see, and this is clearly the objective. I give you 3 references. One, the Greenwich Park primary school at East Bank Essequibo. Mm-hmm. When that school was constructed, they had to get people to send their children out of catchment area so that school's population, that mm-hmm. school's mm-hmm. space could be meaningfully utilized. The school was so huge in relation to the catchment area population, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. they had to import school's population. Second is Leonora Secondary School. When that was constructed, 2 schools had to be closed. One, Leonora Secondary School, the original facility had to be closed, and mm-hmm. the St. John's School had to be closed. Mm-hmm. So what happened there is that they merged a junior secondary school with a senior secondary school population, creating a problem for the teachers. That's one example And both of those are in Region 3, where I understand Minister Manikchan now lives. I don't know if that's accurate or not. But surely the president lives there. Then there's the Cato school that was constructed, costing close to $1 billion. And the coalition administration inherited that and had to spend nearly as much, if not more,
2 times the amount,
to put it into a condition that it was usable. And we don't need to mention the Bamia school, which is 2 years behind delivery schedule.
To be completed.
Manikchan is talking about not building schools, but the reason she could talk about the St. Rose's High School being demolished before they came into government is because it was slated for construction and the groundwork was laid for that. So it really brings home the fact that distraction. But tell us about the real numbers, if you will, or the story about the delivery of education outside of the construction area for a second. Walk us through some accomplishments.
Let me say this. Priya is like what I said earlier, a well dressed up mannequin. And that's the PPP. But when you take the clothing off of that mannequin, then you actually see the real beast. And if you recognize all through the budget presentations, we are hearing 1992, what the PNC did in 1992, and what the PNC didn't do in 1992. But you don't hear about the deliverable or what was delivered. What you hear about now is all the fancy thing. Back then in 1992, that Priya and all of them are referring to, we hadn't technology to our fingertips the way we are having it now. Right. So our schools then that were built by the PNC, you couldn't have technology in those schools because it wasn't available widespread.
No, it's a design, I suppose.
If we look at the design of the schools that the PNC built, the schools were built and then you had yard space for our children to be able to run and use up some of the energies. If you look at what is happening now, all of the schools that are built by the PPP are built and you hardly have somewhere for the children to run. The children have to use the school buildings. But getting back to what you were talking about, during the PNC, and let me refer to this as well, during the PNC's reign in 1992, prior to that, we had textbooks that were given to our students. Yeah. We had exercise books that were given to our students. Our learners were exposed and they were offered and they were provided with hot meals. You remember Cerex? Well, you remember the pasteurized milk?
Even before Cerex, I benefited from biscuits and milk.
Right. So I was coming to the hot milk and the biscuits that we all of us enjoyed. But I figured the Minister of Education, she's either she doesn't want people to know her age, or she is just being very blatantly corrupt and liared, let me say that, and she wants to discredit everything that was done by the PNC and the coalition. And so in our schools now, while they boast about having all the technology available to their hand reach, teachers still cannot do what they're supposed to do in terms of delivery in the classrooms, simply because we don't have a reliable internet connectivity system. We don't have a reliable supply of electricity. The schools that are built in terms of the electrical works, it was not designed to accommodate the amount of electrical appliances that you have there. And that's why every now and again there's a fire to school. In terms of resource materials for the teachers, I mean, in this day and age, we would expect that our teachers would be given a printed outline of what they're expected to teach. I hear the minister say this afternoon, well, you can't do printed lesson plans to give out to teachers for them to teach because all the children are not at the same level. I mean, how much more stupid can a minister be when you're going to give that answer? Because the response I'm going to give here is that All of our children write the same exams. Whether you live in Monkey Mountain, or you live in Georgetown, or you live in Oriala, or you live in Linden, all of the children are given the same grade 6 examinations, grade 9 examination, CSEC, CAPE, at the technical level, the same examination they write. So when the minister and the PPP government, they always use sidebars as distractions for their incompetence. And so the level of incompetence is not only great, but it's massive at the Ministry of Education and surrounded by the entire government. I hear you, you're talking about the delivery of education. If we were to look at the training of teachers, the Cyril Potter College of itself and the administration there, they're under severe pressure. They have actors and actresses. They have $700 part-time for part-time lecturers, $800, $1,200. That's what you pay part-time lecturers. The lecturers who are there full-time, it's a whole lot of who know who and who doesn't know who. And that's how the scale is rated. And so the lecturers there, in terms of preparing our teachers to face the classroom, the resources available to them is inadequate. Added to that is the amount of stress that the lecturers themselves are under. We have a principal at Cyril Potter College, but yet there's somebody who's called the director of something who is there watching over the principal. And you wonder.
But all of
it's
that,
what they create every time. They just create positions for their friends and their families. And so at that level, in terms of preparing our teachers for the world out there, lots and lots is left to be desired.
But in spite of the hierarchy you're talking about at the CPCE, there's evidence out there that persons who dropped out of the training program have been certified as trained teachers. There's a particular village, an indigenous village that I know of, where such a person is in the service. Such a person who had dropped out from training college, and I understand that people, who failed were also certified. So they seem to be that as a problem, and the other problem seems to be the level of incentives offered to our teaching staff across the country. I refer to the so-called negotiated wage increase between the GTU, of which you know something, and the government of Guyana. What's the mood of teachers? Is this increase adequate given the size of this budget?
Before I get to the mood of teachers, let me say to you that the issue you raised about the training of teachers and teachers who have not completed the program were allowed to graduate. That's a fact. The Ministry of Education and the entire PPP government, I said it earlier, they're interested in quantity and not quality. So for Priya Manik Chand, 1,500 teachers we've graduated, 3,000 teachers we've graduated. But when you check the quality of teachers that they're putting out there, you might as well graduate 2 or 3 teachers and don't bother with the 50. But they're accustomed to big numbers, and big numbers give them the kind of hype. And you mentioned about 2 or 3 cases that you know of, but there are many more. As a matter of fact, let me say, there's a teacher who lives she lives at St. Cuthbert's within that Amerindian settlement. And that teacher, she was honest enough to say she did not complete the program. 2 semesters she did not complete. But the teacher's name was called on the day of graduation. The teacher did not attend the graduation because she knew she did not complete the program. But her name was called at the graduation when the announcement was being made. And her name was not only called to say she passed, but to say she passed with credit. And so here is it. We have a teacher whose status is upgraded as a trained teacher, but she did not complete the program. As a matter of fact, the teachers in that particular area, they complained of the problems that they were having with the internet and not getting to attend the classes, not being able to sign in and all of that. CPC did make some sort of intervention, but it was not enough. So things went haywire. They couldn't complete the program. But quite a few of those teachers have graduated, and they're receiving their salaries. As a matter of fact, let me say to you that the Teaching Service Commission wrote the teacher asking her to please provide her transcript so that they can upgrade her status. The teacher did exactly that. She went to CPC and she was provided with her transcript that was signed by the principal and others. She took that to TSC, she got her upgrade. A couple of months after, somebody reported that, look, this teacher, she did not complete the program. And why did you upgrade her? The Teaching Service Commission issued a letter summoning the teacher to the Teaching Service Commission to be disciplined.
The teacher to be disciplined.
For the teacher to be disciplined because the teacher was dishonest. Of course, the GTU took that matter in hand and we represented the teacher. When the teacher provided her evidence to say, look, my name was called at the graduation. Here is the document. When they opened that document and they put it on, of course, they have a large screen there. I think it's a 75-inch television. They put it out there, and here is it. The names are being called. Persons are going up and receiving their little piece of white paper. And out of the blues, the name of this teacher called graduated with credit. And so at that point, the Teaching Service Commission, they retreated. And they said, well, we are going to investigate. And we're still waiting for them to complete their investigations. But this is to say
the level. The wrong persons.
No, they're investigating. They're going to investigate with CPC to find out what happened here. The teacher's name is on the list. The teacher's transcript was signed. The teacher's name was called at the graduation. And so this is displaying the kind of the incompetence that has taken over the PPP. Numbers matter, not quality, but quantity.
The emphasis is obviously on capital expenditure, building structures. There was a time when the same People's Progressive Party government justified not building schools by saying that the population of the particular village did not warrant a school because the building will be underutilized,
and it would be too expensive for them to maintain.
And the teacher-to-student ratio would cause them to be expending monies where monies should not be expended. A lot of justification. But here we are now, where Region 9 is obviously the coveted region in the upcoming elections. And there's a number of projects there involving the construction of schools without regard for the population. And many feel that based on the village populations in question, those schools will not be, no government will be able to sustain those schools for very long. What's your view on that?
Well, again, here it is, the PPP who gloats in just number of buildings, so that they can say we constructed 15 schools, we constructed 25 schools. That's their hype. That is what I guess it probably gives them some bit of what?
But they focus.
I don't know. But let me say to you, the PPP, they like to do things and offer lots of justification, because we heard the minister today saying they had to implement fees at the university because they were in a crisis. And so they implemented fees at the university. But yet, they are blaming the coalition government because the fees were raised. Now, if you were in a crisis then and you implemented paying at the university, which was free under the PNC, LFS Burnham instituted that free education from nursery to university. In 1992, when you took office, you decided to implement fees, but you're saying you want to justify the reason why you implemented fees, but the justification by the coalition government for raising the fees is not good enough. And so this is the PPP. They like to do things and then they go out there and cover their tracks. I remember when the same PPP government, when they were in opposition, they said to the coalition, people can't eat roads. But the very PPP government, they're now building roads here, there, everywhere. Whether it's a road, a concrete strip, or whatever, they're constructing them.
And the new MP for the PPP criticized someone for suggesting that the citizens can't eat roads. You know, it's remarkable, but
It's the PPP you're
it
dealing
is
with.
the PPP. The campaign in this National Assembly at the moment, as the debate on Budget 2025 proceeds, is a campaign of lies. It's very clear. Lies and distortions, avoidance of their own numbers, and engaging in abusing.
Well, I don't think nothing could beat this one, where the Minister of Education said in her presentation, she said, "I am not trained, and I'm not a graduate, and I'm not qualified." And somebody, should be asking the minister. Somebody should be surcharging the minister. I think, the Auditor General should surcharge the minister for making that kind of statement, because if somebody is not qualified and then you're paying them, then something is definitely wrong. But we understand all the campaign gimmicks and so on that is going to take place now with the PPP, because they've recognized that the writing is right there on the wall. What the PPP don't understand is that the crumbs from the bread don't taste like the loaf. And people have come to recognize that you can't continue to give me crumbs because I don't get the same taste. Everywhere you go, you hear the cry from educators, you hear the cry from the learners, you hear the cry from their parents. Just last week, we saw a little boy from West Rumveld Primary School who was on a live program, and he was there dressed in a school uniform, and he was talking about the feeding program, sour juice, the sandwich that they gave them, some, according to the little child, some smash up cheese, and they put a coloring on it. He spoke about not having water at his school. The boys have to use the girls' toilet. The toilets can't flush. The handle on the flusher is broken. He spoke about the lighting at the school, that they had fires at the school because they don't do proper things. And he was saying to the minister, you're having lots and lots of monies. Do proper things, put a proper system in place so that the feeding program could be one that is and the child said this, is of a balanced diet. We don't get a balanced diet. We get some bread now, and you can get some sausage then, no fruits, and one juice all the time. And so this is the cry of a little child. We also hear the cry of the teachers that the compensation is not it's not enough for them. Teachers have to do, take monies from their own pockets to assist their learners. But yet this government does not recognize not only teachers, but public servants in general. They don't recognize you. Could you imagine the Ministry of Education and many other sectors, they are going as far as monitoring the Facebook pages of their staff members?
Well, we know that's happening all across the country, particularly in the election year. The emphasis, ladies and gentlemen, is on structures, physical structures going up, providing monies for friends, families, and favorites, and zero input for the development of people, the lives, livelihood, and well-being of people and children. That's not receiving any attention from Budget 2025. We've been talking with Coretta McDonald, Member of Parliament, Shadow Minister of Education. Thanks for joining and staying with us. This has been another edition of Budget in Focus. We'll be back with more.